Hi, Chitra. Good morning.
Hi, good morning.
Swapna is not joining today. I think she's busy, but Archana will join.
Yeah, sure.
Okay. So how was did I see your bird illustration? You've not shared. Was it okay for you?
Yes, I can show you now.
Okay.
I think I showed it last time, but I don't know whether. Uh, yes, in fact, I did a larger one. I think I sent you the larger image.
Oh, it's not in the group though.
Yes, should I put it on the group?
Yeah, best to just put it on
Oh, okay, okay.
because
Sure.
then everyone I like the subtle pressure that it puts everybody else on.
Okay. Yeah, and I tried the raptor also actually afterwards, though I didn't
Okay.
send it. So maybe I'll just do it right now.
Okay.
Light is not very good. Because for the raptor, you had told us to kind of try some slightly different
Yeah.
way of, and I did notice that at some point I found it confusing. So now that I look at it myself later, it's when I can make out where I have hesitated before while drawing it.
Okay. That's interesting.
So yeah, because then I was like, oh, okay, this obviously I didn't quite know what to do over there. So yeah, I'll put it on the group.
So
Yes.
that free sketching thing that I make everyone do,
Yes.
that's like a technique that is used a lot in art colleges. So they focus on like a 3 second or 5 second illustration, uh, which is hardly any time. So
Yes.
you're meant to make each line be very convincing. So even like you must have seen that very popular image of Mahatma Gandhi where there's just a head,
Hmm.
the shape of the head drawn with glasses. So the
Hmm.
kind of minimalist communication that you can make with just lines, a strong sense of line, is what they try to do in art colleges. The second thing that happens with that line is that you are because there's such limited time, you have no time to second guess yourself. You just
Yes.
whatever, so that at least there's something to present, and you realize that that is when you are able to do a lot of your work with a certain elegance to the line. However much we may think that a line is not as good, when we let it go, it still looks better than when we are trying to be very careful.
Hmm.
So that's the only way I have found that we land up doing a practice which helps the line become stronger. Once you
Hmm.
see the result, then you realize that okay, a confident line does not always have to be a correct line, and an incorrect line is not a wrong line.
Hmm.
So it all helps to build the whole the image, fortifies the image much better. So the initial hesitation is because you assume all the problems. Will I get
Ah,
the shape right? What if the shape looks wrong? And the shape, if I tell you, most of the time the shape is wrong. Yeah.
yeah.
You feel then, okay, then what's the point? Then
Okay.
that continuous line actually makes sense because then you're sculpting it on paper. Yeah, this is nice. Very nice.
So over there in the front, where the dark part of
Yeah.
near the shoulder, where
Mm.
it's come down, I kind of got slightly. I didn't know what to do. So it was
Uh-huh.
like, that was the dark part of the bird.
Yeah.
So then it was a little confusing.
Let me see how our reference images look. Yeah. So some places you don't really see much. So in that case, you can just shade the entire space. That's also fine.
Hmm. And that one, what was that bird? The other bird which we did in class?
Uh, which one did we do?
Because last time you told us the names of them, but now I've forgotten.
Oh,
The one where we, yeah, I've sent
one
it to you now.
okay, the one we did in class, that one, um,
The blue and yellow.
I don't know what that bird is. I should find out.
Okay.
You could do a quick Google search on this.
Yes, yes,
Google Lens.
yes.
Okay, so today we'll do insects. Insects is fine, right? Or did I say we will do uh, reptiles? Have I said we do reptiles or insects? Any idea? I don't remember. Okay,
No,
no.
you said we were going to do that Buddha.
Oh yeah, but today again, Sapna is not there.
Okay.
No wonder. Okay, so we'll do the Buddha whenever everyone is there, whatever, regardless of what the subject, because this is going to keep happening. And I think there are I'm going to share some more images of certain.
So the bird what we are talking about, that is Himalayan black lord tit.
Okay.
Ah, thanks. You did a Google Lens, did you?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Nowadays I'm using Google Lens a lot every for my work
Same
also.
here. I'm I'm so pleased with Google Lens. It's just fantastic.
You know what I'm using for?
Hmm.
I went on a Spanish app and we do develop it in English. So I have to understand Spanish. So what I do is I focus on my UI and then focus on it, and it shows the translation directly on
Yeah.
your mobile.
Yeah, I have seen that. So, in fact, when you're walking about in cities, you can just do that. We did that in Thailand 4 years ago, where you could just hold up Google Translate. At that time, I didn't have Google Lens, but they had already worked that out. So you are seeing a street view, but it immediately live, it keeps changing the signs. It's really science fiction, huh?
Yeah.
Okay, so I've shared pictures of two iguanas and also some insects. So I want to do the first iguana. I want us to just sketch, because since this is our last class for nature, we might not get the opportunity to study these topics. Let me share the image that I'm speaking about, this one.
Yes.
So there's lots of flows in the line. So we can do a very nice pencil sketch with this. Lots of texture. And here also we have the opportunity to study what textures we focus on and what textures you can sometimes ignore. The really tiny scales, they are so intimidating. And often we feel that maybe it's let me just take out 6 months of my life to do these one by one. But you don't really need to do that much. So I just wanted to show you how you can create a sense of scales all over without having to draw each and every scale, because that drawing of each and every scale may make your illustration look too heavy and sometimes just too unelegant. So in this case, not less is more, but we should know where to stop. Adequate is enough. Okay. So if you can expand the picture a little bit, that's fine. Just magnify it a little bit so that we can see details. But our picture is going to be just about so much. So that's about half of my page. This is my page, and I'm just going to make it in so much, whatever I can make. So if you land up making a really big head, just focus on the head. Don't do the whole image, because the moment it starts becoming more than your palm size, there are too many details that you need to furnish. So the loose sketch that I speak about is trying to see basic shapes. And just follow the silhouette. And related to one or the other feature, you can see where the other features come, and if you are getting the distances right between them and you are getting the shape right.
Kind of a rough diamond shape, including the big round on the cheek, no?
A diamond shape here.
No, the whole head, including that big round on the cheek,
Yeah.
is kind of a very rough diamond shape.
Yeah, it could be that. Everyone will see a shape
Yeah.
that of your own.
Mm.
1 second. So after you've drawn about a few basic guidelines, now Chitra, like you were saying, the places where it is dark,
Yes.
it can get a little confusing. So
Yes.
wherever you feel yourself confused, don't draw the line. Just leave it there. And what you have to gauge is the distance then where the next visible feature can be drawn. So then I have like the mouth over here. Okay, I can see that. I'll draw that. Then I have one row of scales, then another row of the chin. Then there's a dark patch. So we can start seeing the dark patch as a shape also. And that solves a lot of problems, because then you don't see it as the absence of light as much as the presence of a color. So that's a good exercise in creating flatness in an illustration out of 3D. So I have this shape that is fairly dark. And that gives me a good reference point for the next parts. Now, whatever you do, keep your lines really light and flowy. See? So even with something like this, you're able to create the effect of 3 dimension. Now, the other parts that require focus on are, of course, the shapes of objects like these. Like there's a scale over here, but it is foreshortened, so you can't really see it. So translate the shape as you see it. Do not bother with trying to figure out what it is. The bigger features are easier to translate. So this is where my chin will end. And then I have this whole set of scales, which I'm going to draw very carefully. Keep in mind the proportion. And you can begin your shading with the larger features. So like this large scale and whatever texture it gives us, you can do that. And whatever scales you can draw those. But every time you draw them, keep looking at the reference image. So don't draw them like bricks, and definitely don't first draw horizontal lines and then vertical lines, because that's a very lazy texture. And it really, if it's not like the texture that we see, it does no favors to the illustration. Then at some point, you can let go of the texture. So you just do half lines, a few lines here or there, excuse me. So these are indicative of the texture. But I will do some lines by the mouth. Starting from the left, I will make it's a very prominent feature and makes the iguana look a little menacing because it's got scales along its mouth. So what happens with this is something that I have come across. How do we relate to objects or other beings in nature? Somewhere in our evolutionary psyche, we have embedded information. This is almost like genetic information. And that is to recognize other creatures that are closer to our species by their characteristics. So, for example, a lot of people are creeped out by snakes and reptiles. And that's apparently an evolutionary development. Snakes and reptiles oftentimes are not our friends, though they are not our enemies, as in they're not out to get us. I think we are more the enemies of every creature on the planet. But they can be, because they are venomous, they can be dangerous for our life. So somewhere as a species, we have learned to be wary of them, let's say. And others which we have learned to be not just tolerant, but also friends with. So there is this, I remember reading this article about a theory where the reason why we find puppies or kittens cute, or mammals in general closer to us, is because they are evolutionarily closer to us. And there's something about the eye that we find a little pleasing also and comforting, let's say. That's the more important word. So the pleasing part is when you see the white of the eye. And this is a research that has helped Disney a lot, I think, because they have now, if you notice, many Disney villains are created in such a way that they do not show the eye or the white of the eye, or the eye is like a reptile. By that, we instantly distance ourselves from the character. And when something happens to the character through the course of the movie, children are not traumatized by that. And they can then use that to talk about justice and about injustice and make a certain creature bad just as a representative of ill in society. Of course, this is varied across cultures because if you look at Japanese culture, they have different connotations. And what we see in Disney is mostly the white man's culture. If you see, like in South Indian cases, when we have Kathakali dancers, they make their eyes red. And that's supposed to be, I don't know whether it's supposed to be attractive, but it's definitely not supposed to be scary. So there's cultural differences also. But by and large, a certain kinship to mammalian eyes for us exists. And in this case now, this reptile has got, at least this one iguana seems to have eyes which make sense. They look very human-like, except they don't have a white of the eye. So it's a very textured eye. And it is pretty dark. So if this iguana were to be put into a Disney movie, if it were a friendly character, they would convert the eye and give it a lot of white in the eye. And if it is a villain, they would keep the eye like this, or convert it to maybe red or green and make it look very sinister. Now, here I've now come to an area where the scales are very tiny. So what I do is I just indicate the existence of scales by drawing short lines. Like over here, now there are some scales. If I try and draw all of them, it'll take me 6 months. And of course, I will never dissuade anybody from doing more. But in a sketch like this, it also looks nice to have a few small scales and the remaining in that size proportion, you can just indicate a few shapes. Now, don't make them all dashes because that is unnatural, and not in the same direction because that's unnatural as well. But can you see how I am discreet about, well, not discreet. I'm using my discretion to fill in the right sized and shaped scales along the face. So a sketch can be such that you focus on a few of these textures, and then you can resort to making just silhouettes of shapes that you see around. Now see what's happening is as I fill up more data, I'm better equipped to draw the rest of the features. So obviously what I had drawn over here is slightly off. And I can always just shade it lightly so that it looks like part of the illustration. And I personally enjoy it when a pencil sketch is left half done. So I'll draw some of these features like the thorn-like objects around it, around its neck. In this respect, this animal almost looks like a tree. There are a lot of trees like the box tree that have got thorns, no? So a few of these features are fine. You can create a textural shading like this where you don't shade it smooth, almost with lines. And you just keep going round and round and round. And as the lines cross, they will start looking irregular. And you can leave some portion untextured also. Just draw a few lines from here just draw the dark shadows. So here I'm going to draw a line which is not smooth as well over here. And because of this undulating line, a very wobbly line, the texture is communicated like this. If you make it smooth, it'll look like a smooth line, a smooth texture like maybe even satin. But these edges and the shading or the shadow that we make can be a rough shadow. Now, so can you see over here, there is no need to put anything more. You can, I love shading these scales because they are a great study in reflection. So at some point you will have reflection and some places you will have it dark. So those can be shaded. This can become darker now, but it doesn't have to be one flat dark shape. So at any point when you're shading, just observe one thing. Most times when we're shading, I've seen in beginners that your shading has lines and it's only back and forth, or it's like this. It's not merging. So say for example, I have a line that's drawn like that and you have to draw a shadow here. Very often it's a line like that. It's all in one direction. But this looks like a scribble and it's fine. It's not wrong. But try to, when this is the case and we're shading the iguanas, try and make it a little less in lines and more about grinding the graphite onto paper. So there's a difference. Here you're just making lines, zigzag, and here you are focusing on smoothly moving your pencil over the surface so that you deposit a certain amount of graphite onto the paper. So just try to see if that makes a difference in your shading quality. Now here you can also draw lines afterwards, but that's a different technique of illustration. Now currently my iguana is looking very bland because he doesn't have these spiky, dramatic mohawk. And features like that, when you are going to do partial shading, I generally recommend that consider it like a layer of shading or detail that comes to a certain point and then it can recede. So as you come from the face downward, all details can become a little less visible. So just hinting at features existing is good enough, and closer to the face you can have more details and more contrast. So with that in mind, these spikes on top, they can also have texture closer to the top, and then at the bottom, you just draw a few lines and that does the job.
I have an unrelated question for Archana actually.
Okay.
How are you managing you have a second camera pointing at your sketchbook?
Yeah, I have a document scanner.
Ah, okay. Fine, thanks.
Archana needs it for her work. So she's got
Right.
full setup. She can start her own classes.
Wow. I'm like, wow, this is great.
I think in a few years' time, this will become as ubiquitous as computers in our homes, having a camera setup that, as it now anyway, my phone, I've been using it as a camera also. So the new iPhones are equipped for that. So you don't need an external camera. And I guess the next is they just come with inbuilt tripods or God knows what. Okay, this is the other technique that you can do for scales is just a scribble. For this part, you have to be a little comfortable with scribbling in all directions.
When I was studying in my degree,
Huh?
I had zoology as a subject.
Oh, really? Oh,
I still have my record. Last time when I came, I was thinking to carry that, but it is so heavy. It has
huh.
all reptiles, all
Wow.
different types of animals. I think I have taken some pictures of it.
I I think I would have loved to do that. If only we had these at that time, if we'd had liberal arts, I think I would have taken biology just for the illustration and then everything else. Because I studied arts and one of my subjects was logic, which was just so confusing. It didn't work for me at all. But I would have loved to do biology instead.
I did not do botany, but my friends like records I used to like draw and give it to them.
Oh, yeah? Oh, see,
It
there's
was like,
always that one student who does it for everyone else.
and I remember like the students who don't draw, they take the records from the seniors.
Uh-huh.
But I try to like keep it for myself. I didn't want to like give it to anyone.
Hmm. So we've spent about half an hour in drawing this illustration. And that's about as much as you should take to make what's technically supposed to be a free sketch. Now imagine translating this into a 5 second sketch. So let me demonstrate. I haven't done this because I haven't gone to an art college, but reading biographies of artists, this is what I've done. We have to just count to 5. So tick, tick 1, tick, tick 2, tick, tick 3, tick, tick 4, tick, tick 5. That's as much as I can do in 5 seconds. And then I have to draw another one. So it's not as if you wait over here. No time to wait. So that we have the next picture. So tick, tick 1, tick, tick 2, tick, tick 3, tick, tick 4, tick, tick 5. That's it. So nuance. What you get is nuance of the creature. Okay. Shall we move to the insects now? Or would you like some more time for this? Because I love this subject and we can take our time doing this. The next one that we are going to make is the scarab beetle. That's also a very beautiful creature.
I'm thinking that Swapna did not must have not joined because of this lizard and everything.
No,
I
oh.
You know, like I know like couple of them who don't like
Yeah, one, but I hadn't put the lizard, I mean the iguana in the class. It was insects.
insects. Yeah.
It is possible that she's squeamish about insects also. There's no telling. But I don't know why she wouldn't say it then, if that is the case, because one student called up last week and asked me if we're really going to do reptiles because she gets so creeped out by reptiles that she said, I'd rather not attend. I'll do something else, she said. So I told her, no, it's not compulsory that everybody has to do reptiles, but if you give me feedback, then I can avoid certain things. With animals, people are very sensitive, especially with things like snakes and insects and all. Maybe you just don't like them. No fault, we can always change it. All right. So the next feature is this one. This is a very, very nice creature to sketch. And the next one is a similar beetle, but this is an illustration. It's not the original because it's a. I have a feeling that they would have made this illustration from a dead insect, and maybe I couldn't find a picture of a live insect with its wings showing from underneath the exoskeleton. But we are going to make this one and then we are going to paint these others. So the ladybug, this is another beetle, and if time permits, just how to sketch moths. So for the scarab, we're going to again do the same thing, draw a loose sketch of it so we get an idea of the different, very complex shape of their horns, their antennae, construction of their legs, and how they get attached to the body, all of that. So more from the construction point of view than shading. So below the iguana, you can make any kind of grid that you want. So you could probably make it like a square and then a rectangle. And then please just draw the lines of the basic elements. You don't have to draw all 6 legs at this stage. Once you have the proportion, then you can draw the shape. In that time, you will focus on one part at a time. With subject to how you have illustrated that, you will make the next part. So this one now, I'll look at how wide this would be, the thorax. This almost looks like it's wearing a breastplate armor on its back. And slowly start darkening the lines as you start seeing those shapes. When you're looking at heights of objects also, just see in comparison to the next object that you can measure, how tall is its horn. And often when you have to make symmetrical shapes, it's a good idea to make them together. The shapes on both sides should be made simultaneously. So you make the Y shape on top first, come down, then the additional hook, come down, and then these muscly arm-like shapes. This will also give you an idea about I don't know whether this is the head or the mouth. And then the shape and the length of the antennae. Now, of course, it also helps if you shade things the way you see them. You don't just shade the whole thing. There's a rim to the head armor, so make that rim, and then shade appropriately. So leave the place where you see a highlight. In these creatures, these highlights are very important because that shows that the critter is an insect which has a shiny body. And I think that's one of their most interesting features. And sometimes that's what makes them look so alien to us, that the bodies are not soft and supple like skin, and they are hard and shiny like armor. And this armor looks different from the armor of rhinos or turtles. Although my daughter is freaked out by turtles also. Okay, now after you've done the body, it's much easier to draw the limbs. And like I said, try to draw both sides simultaneously. So you draw one part, upper leg, then the lower, then you will be able to really see the shape. Then we'll draw extra hair-like extensions. The big problem that comes with insects is getting their limbs right because they are so weird. So where they start from and what are their dimensions, and what angles they make. Once you get that, then They look pretty convincing. Now, these shapes are very important. They have really interesting, weird feet parts. And these shapes are almost like triangles linked into each other because they have spikes on both sides. Now, when you're making the spikes on the side, don't make them just as lines like that. And they're definitely not hair. So make them like really tiny triangles. And then you can shade. Now here I can use the whole line shading because I personally just love it when we can translate lines or shading of lines to seem like it is a three-dimensional object. So here we have the lightness or darkness of the line itself. It's the distance between the lines, so the density, and the darkness of the line. So you can increase density by changing directions of the lines that you draw. And this is the quickest way of illustrating anything, 3D effects, a quick sketch or jotting down of an idea. So you can change the angle of the pencil line. There it's the same. And then you have these hair-like antenna.
Aditya, I have sent the iguana on the group.
Ah, okay. Oh, nice. Very nice. So I can see the heavy shading in your pencil work. The
Yes,
hand is a little heavy. So remember, this is
right.
exactly what I was telling you about, the shading. And the only thing is the practice of moving your fingers in different directions for shading.
Right.
You're on the right track. Very nice. So you got the shape right. You've got most of the proportions right.
Okay.
It's just the shading is in one direction right now.
Hmm. Okay.
Okay. Now, what I want to do is draw the moth, the green beetle, and the ladybug together. And then we'll be painting them in a sequence so that I can show you multiple things at the same time and save time. So when I'm drawing the butterfly, the moth or a butterfly, this is how I go about it. So I want you to just observe this for the moment, and then you can draw it again after me. I'm going to show you making of the grid on the moth, like every other creature that we made also. So if you can put your tools down and just observe, it'll help. Since measurement of proportions is the most vital part in getting the right shape of whatever creature you're drawing, start by looking for shapes in the creature, in the reference image. So let's say we have a circle, and then from the center of the circle, we have a line coming down. Now, how tall is this line? You must ask. And you can use the circle as a unit. So this is the height of the circle. This is circle 1 unit, 2 unit, and about 3 of the circles. Beyond the circle would be the body. After this, from different sides of that circle, like this is 7 o'clock, this is 5 o'clock, you can see that you can draw a line straight down from there, and you can build maybe some of your wings from that side. Then you have a line that starts off at 9 o'clock and 3 o'clock, but it's almost parallel to or going towards 8 o'clock and 4 o'clock. So we got the direction of the lines. And then we need to get the height of that shape as well. So if I were to draw a line, since the moth is sitting a little angle, I'm going to draw a line that's crooked so that it sits perpendicular to the center line of the body. At what point do we start turning? So here we start turning the wing at 1/3 from the bottom. So there's like this, right up to and beyond the first oblique and then the second oblique. So how far does one go? How much higher does one go? Like what is the distance over here? Otherwise you'll land up making something like that and draw a completely different species. These are sometimes measured with a base unit like that of the circle, or very often just with your eye. If you can trust what your eye is seeing, you will be able to draw this. I'm taking a screenshot of this and I'll share it so we can have it with us. Okay, now let's try drawing this moth. So again, don't make it too large. We can make this moth about this big over here, and then we can make the 2 beetles somewhere over here or maybe here so that we can write a title. The circle will determine the proportion, the rest of the proportion of the moth. So remember the circle is 1/4 of the length of the moth. So if your circle is this big, your moth is going to be 1, 2, 3, and 4. This is the length of the body. Then you have lines that you can draw or drop towards 4 o'clock and 7 o'clock, or 5 o'clock and 7 o'clock, and 4 o'clock and 8 o'clock. Then at the base, you can have a line going straight across. So here now we have a shape that's like this. at about a third, comes up somewhere here. And then you have a shape over here. So we can learn to trust our eyes quite a bit.
Aditi, I'll just be back in 5 minutes.
Okay, fine.
Sorry.
Even I'll just go get some water for myself.
Yeah, sorry, I'm back.
Hey, Chitra. Aditi
Yeah,
went
yeah,
for some water.
yeah.
You're from which location, Chitra?
I live in Bangalore.
Oh, okay.
You are where? Located where?
I'm from Canada.
Hmm.
Okay, I'm back.
Yeah, I'm back too. Thanks.
Okay, after you've drawn the basic shape, do make the details observing the original image, not just what you see on this, because some of your proportions might change, and start demarcating these areas, the patterns that you see. Now, at this point, if you have an eraser or flexible eraser, you should remove the excess lines. And all these guidelines can be removed. All the extra lines that you had to make can be erased. Because you don't want them to interfere with the final image. And pencil lines can sometimes be an asset underneath it, but in terms of insects, it might just add to the confusion, make the texture look a little unrefined. The other two are fairly simple to draw. Now, here's one tip. Whenever you make a page, even if it's for practice, try and see if you can compose everything properly. So look at the overall form. Here we have a horizontal, vertical, and then we have a circular form. So how do you fit everything so that it looks symmetrical and nice? Now I can, instead of drawing my next beetle here, I could in fact draw my next beetle on this side. About the same size. One will be in pencil, one will be in paint. And somewhere over here, I can draw a beetle, or maybe over here. And here I can write the title of the page. So try to, this is again one thing that we lack, the skill of presentation. Because it's almost an afterthought. And in your case, I wouldn't blame you because you don't know how the class is planned. But it is my job to inform you so that once you know all the data, it's a good idea to think of composition every time. So even if you are writing a grocery list or you're writing something really mundane, you can still convert that into a mini art project and write it in a more pleasing composition. So the difference between artists and non-artists is this extra thought given to everything visual. If it's going to be on paper, if it's going to come from your hand, you have an obligation to make it look pretty or meaningful or both. So as artists, we have the opportunity to make an impact, whatever the impact may be, and you can almost often, most often control the result through the skill of just studying how visuals work for people. Nowadays, advertisers are making such a lot of money because of their study of that. And I must say, it is extremely effective. Oh, see, my leg has come down too low. That's my beetle. And next one, I will make my ladybug. So in the reference image, the ladybug looks pretty big. So I'm going to make it somewhere here. Now, a tip on composition. Composition is such, there are a few rules about composition. where you place the items in such a manner that they divide space, that's the space on the paper, pleasing, in a pleasing manner, and they allow the eye to move from one area of the page to the next with a kind of rhythm that makes it pleasurable experience. That's why even rubbish artists get away with making abstract art. In my mind, actually, it is such that abstract art must be the last thing that you do, because you should develop to a point where you can think in those abstractions. But some people just look at it as a splash of color and decide that that's what they're good at and they're going to do it. But a good abstract artist is actually a very good artist who can do realistic so well that through the realistic he or she is able to see abstracts. Again, too low. Far also. Okay. Doesn't look like the bug.
I'm discovering that I have a distinct handedness when it comes to symmetrical objects. One side is easier to draw than the other.
Yeah, I see all my one side has a different shape and the other one is a different.
Yeah.
Okay, now in the case of my beetle, I'm not very sure about the limbs. I think they're a little too disproportionate to the body. But I'm going to leave them here till I paint the whole insect, and then I will take a call on how I can make these. I need to make them smaller in proportion to the body. Now the image that I've sent is actually very large, so I can't seem to reduce it in size. So, and what I've drawn is smaller. So while I got the proportions of the body right, the proportions of the leg have gone a little awry. So these are, again, things that happen all the time. When in doubt, don't paint, don't proceed. Draw everything else. Move to the next thing that you're sure about and draw that. And it's just it's almost as if you are in a blind person or a blindfolded in a dark room, and you touch something that you're familiar, touch something that you're unfamiliar with, but you know a list of objects that are there in that room. So you can, by process of elimination, come closer and closer to the unknown. Okay, shall we start painting? Chitra, how are you doing?
I've actually just started drawing the ladybug.
Okay. All right. I'll wait for a couple of minutes. Don't spend too much time on it. Just make a rough shape.
Okay.
And make the body, because it's just an oval shape, and then you can create the patterns. That should do it.
Yes, I could in principle do the legs directly with a brush because they're so small.
Yeah.
I can put the positions.
All right. Now, size of brush is important for any of these because the larger the area, the bigger brush you use. Smaller areas, you will use the detail brushes. Two things to keep in mind in when you are doing watercolor is the amount of medium that you hold in the brush and the consistency of the medium itself. So let me demonstrate over here. We have a dual tone wing for this moth, and then it's got a dual tone thorax as well. And these are two different things altogether. But there is some similarity in this. So we can do something like this. You can create an orange and gamboge color mix. Not a mix, sorry. Always use the palette to test your consistency. And now because lighter colors at the bottom, I will invert my illustration. Start from the bottom, and this entire patch I'm going to paint. So I'm going to put gamboge with a flattened brush like that so that there's ample medium and the paper is quickly stained. So don't use just the tip because you need this paint to remain a little wet. And then you can go into this with a mix of gamboge and orange because you don't want it too deep. And using vertical strokes. Now the consistency and the quantity of paint is very important here. If you have a very watery paint, that will go into the existing color so much that there will be nothing left. You won't see the difference. And if the quantity of the color is, before I do that, as you come closer over here, just use vertical lines itself so that you can imitate the furry end of the head. It is quite a furry end, so don't finish it with a smooth line here. So this is gamboge and orange. I'm going to write the colors on the side so we can always refer to them. Now, while this is drying, you can potentially move to the others. So I'm going to do something similar for the beetle as well. Similar colors, but gamboge, orange, and scarlet. Now there's a highlight over here. So what I'm going to suggest to both of you is maybe don't do the red beetle right now. You can watch the recording from an hour and 15 minutes down, and you'll see me doing this. So you can do it separately. Just focus on these two at the same time. So while this is drying, you can observe, and then we will make this illustration. So I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to put gamboge around the area that I think has got a highlight or a light color. And it is fairly wet enough to receive the next color. In case your color dries at this point for whatever reason, then don't put in the next color. Put in the first color again and wet it. And then I'm going to make an orange and red mix so that I can pull this. Now I just need to keep the colors wet enough to introduce the next color. But now beyond this point, if it's the same shade, I'm just going to drag it. I'm going to leave a little highlight on the left here. And pull it straight down. So this is scarlet and gamboge, scarlet and orange. And I can see that it's light on the right, lighter on the right. So I'm going to keep it orange mostly. Keep a highlight over there and pull the color down into these wingtips. So this is layer one. I'm going to leave it like that. But in this layer, I have established a nice highlight and works really well. Okay, now moving on to the green scarab. Here again, we are going to use a mix of lemon yellow, sap green, and a little bit of cobalt blue. So you have lemon yellow and sap green making a very vibrant green. My lemon yellow and sap green have become a little duller, but if you think yours is very fluorescent, add a little bit of yellow ochre. And to this color, then we're going to add a little bit of maybe ultramarine blue, which I have on the side here to make the darker parts. Now, let me show you one segment at a time. I have this color ready, and I have my ultramarine blue prepped and ready as well. So it's hydrated, willing to work, and we need a very little amount. So I just want you to observe this. Don't paint. Don't paint. Make the shape of the highlights and make them slightly larger than the highlight that you see. Just slightly. And then paint a reasonably large section around it green. Press the brush along the edges so that you can imitate a lighter shade. And then just drop in a little bit of ultramarine blue. So that means that your green has to be fairly wet. Okay, so this is the second way of mixing colors. One is when you merge one beyond the other, and here is when you wet an area and then you drop in a second color. You need a very little quantity. So if I were to show you what quantity of paint I have, it's only about this light. This is the color. This is how dark it is, but it appears only this light. This is the quantity of pigment that I have in the brush. That's why I get a very subtle color over here. Okay, do you want to give it a shot now? On the same process for the one below. Now, when you're mixing colors also in the palette, don't mix too much. Here, I think a little extra lemon green, lemon yellow will work. Now here my color is not blended properly. And this is very likely to happen. If that is the case, don't fiddle with it. Don't try to blend it at this stage. Let it be. In trying to remove it or adjust it at this stage will just ruin it even further. As a first layer, this is okay. We can move with it. So here's another practice that I think everyone should do, and that's to learn to paint by flattening the brush. Normally we paint holding the brush upright like that, but also consider flattening it this way. So it usually applies very little paint in that process. Yes. Here I managed to get a good drop. How are you doing, Chitra? Because I can see Archana's, I know she's finished it.
Yeah, I'll show you.
Okay. Now, when we come back to the moth, Here's something that I like to do, and it's not really necessary, but gives a very nice 3D effect to anything that is white or off-white. So I make this generic gray color using black, burnt umber, and ultramarine blue, and then taking a very little amount, like just the amount that's over here, which will barely make any mark. I will create just a swish of color along the wing of this moth. So it's mostly just water, but it gives a three-dimensional look. So wherever we have a little gray, I will make that mark, but with very little paint. It's almost imperceptible. Once that is done, I'm going to paint the thorax of this creature in a mix of orange mixed with gamboge and scarlet, coming down to orange mixed with scarlet. So starting from the bottom, I'm going to bring it up. Since watercolor is about layering, the more layers you create and the more color multiples you make, the shades you make with different types of colors, the more vibrant your picture ends up looking. All the layers that come close to the neck will be finished with perpendicular strokes, not a smooth stroke.
Is it visible? I'm holding it in front of the laptop camera.
Sorry, what?
No, I'm holding my picture up to the.
Oh, 1 second, 1 second.
Okay, okay.
Okay, got it, got it. Yes. Let me just see it. Okay, nice, nice. It's looking good. Very good.
Okay.
Okay. Now over here is just a matter of marking the pattern with black. Of course, with a small brush, first paint all the red details. So we have a line over here that's horizontal. And here as well, if you want, you can make it a little fuzzy by making perpendicular lines on that horizontal line. And then a little gamboge for the head or mouth area. So the main part of insects is this kind of blended color. I'm going to repeat the same for the beetle and repeat the same also for the green scarab. The same colors again, or you can also change colors depending upon how you're looking at them. Okay, so here again, we follow the same rule, same overlap. And this time round, if you want, you can add more colors. Like, for example, I think I can add either a gamboge or mix of gamboge or lemon in the central section. So it'll just change the tone a little bit. Definitely lemon yellow over here. And I'll go over some parts of the what I'd left as the highlight and use the earlier green to pull the color into the earlier area. So you'll see that when you layer it, it brings out more meaning. Here I'm going to now blend it, not drop the color in. Go back to green. And then maybe a little bit of lemon again over here. So we need that flexibility of jumping from one color to the next. And here, when you flatten your brush, you cover a larger ground much easily. Second, third, fourth layers will often give you much more drama. So whenever you see watercolor artists painting, there's like this huge orchestra that they do between the water and the brush, and then they're doing like a whole dance between all these. Now beyond this point, it's pretty much just color matching. Here you've got yellow ochre, lemon yellow, and a little bit of green, whatever is residual in your brush. And then from there, we can move to light red. And one must remember that we are making a watercolor illustration after all. So a few colors going into each other is a good thing. Don't shy away from that. So some of your color that escapes its spot and goes and sits next to another color is not a bad thing at all. These are not botanical illustrations. I'm going to use the same color, light red, with maybe a little bit of burnt umber for this part of the feet. Leave a highlight. Yeah, there's a little bit of color blend between, starts off with a brown and then goes into a deep green. After a point, even if you leave the highlight at a random location, even if you don't leave it in where it's supposed to be, as in the picture, but you leave it somewhere, that's fine too. Now, the reason I had asked you to make these slightly bigger was because then you can take a damp brush and fuzz them a bit. This is a delicate exercise. Don't overdo it. Just go over the edge a little bit with not a wet brush, a damp brush, and it'll dislodge some of the color pigments along the edge, the border of that space, and you'll be able to get a much fuzzier image. And once all the colors are inserted, then with a fine brush, you can make all the dark parts. But when you use black, avoid using a flat black. Always mix it with burnt umber to make it slightly brownish at least, or with cobalt blue or ultramarine blue to make it a neutral black again. And now at this stage, we can make these complex shapes. So here I'm just making a C shape first. And then making almost like fingers. And like I said, even if you don't get completely accurate, it's perfectly fine. We're not entomologists, so it's not really going to affect our study much.
Aditi, I will have to leave now.
Yeah,
So I'll watch the video and complete the rest.
all right. I'll be done in another 10 minutes, but you can watch it later.
Yeah, sure.
All right. Okay.
Thanks.
Bye, Chitra.
Bye. Bye, Archana.
Bye, Chitra.
Okay, so now the legs in the back are slightly greenish in color.
Aditi,
Yeah.
okay, your
Yeah,
screen.
I'm here.
Okay.
I'm
Your
almost
screen.
done. I just want to finish this one beetle and then I'll finish the moth at a later date.
No, I see your screen got freezed. I was
Oh, is it?
thinking
Oh, okay.
it's okay.
Okay, so here is the interesting part. These certain details are really fun to make and important to observe. Like the shadow part over here has a little bit of the light red also, just along the edge. And then we have this very delicate line. Almost looks like the cleavage of the insect. So after these colors, then we can finally add the black we've created. So there's a black here as well. Because these fine details. Okay. Oh, there's one more thing. Got so many parts, my God.
Your screen is still freezed, but I'll check your
It's frozen right now?
it's frozen. I don't know why. Is it? I'm just thinking, is it my laptop or yours? I'm not sure.
Oh, maybe, but you can hear my voice, right? Have
Yeah.
you frozen it? Is there a setting like that where you can freeze it?
I don't know. Let me check from mobile. So yeah, now I can see.
Okay. So strange. Cool. So, we can finish this then during the week.
Mhm.
Yeah. And you can share your picture. And please ask Swapna whether it was the insects that drove her away from class.
Because I was just thinking that maybe she must have skipped because of that.
Maybe. Okay, so next week we are starting portraiture.
Okay.
So I'll be starting with the what we've done in the past also, faces, but this time we'll also address 3/4 and side profile because we've not done that before.
Okay.
Okay. And yeah, so next week, all the other classes today, I have had to postpone them to Wednesday, but yours is the only class I took for today. The rest of the day I needed free, so your timing will not change.
Okay. Tomorrow we don't have, right?
Tomorrow there's no class, yeah. Tomorrow, anyway, it was the 5th week. So it would be an extra class, but my school friends are visiting. So I thought I'd take the day off with them.
Okay. Enjoy.
Okay, so I'll catch you next week then.
Yeah. Thanks, Aditi.
Okay, bye, Archana.